Part 35. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 354. Chapter 354. Once upon a time, there was a boy with a dream. When he first entered the martial arts world, he was beaten all over the place. So he practiced hard, but never got the point, until one day he accidentally met a top master. This top master fell in love with him. After drinking for 3 rounds, he patted his shoulder and said, "Oh, you can't practice like this. Let's do this. I'll teach you 3 moves, which will be enough for you to thrive in the world." When the boy heard this, he was instantly happy. So under the guidance of this supreme master, he learned 3 sword techniques. Speaking of which, these 3 sword techniques are all shocking and make ghosts and gods cry. This first move is called Infinite Flow. It is not a new sword technique, but once you learn it, you will be able to parry it. The second move is called Terrifying Wind. This move is different from other sections. When the move is launched, the opponent is already deep in it. The move cannot be seen but is everywhere in the move. If fantasy opens a window for you to see the outside scenery, then supernatural means that you are drawn into this world from the first moment you see it. As for the third move, the master smiled mysteriously and said that martial arts in the world are ever changing, but they never deviate from their origins. Countless moves in front are just foreshadowing, and the last sword is the essence. This move is called the technique of broken chapter. The master told him earnestly and sincerely that he already knew how to use the next move after using this move, and it was very important to be able to connect the past and the next. So he practiced 3 moves hard, but it turned out that he was not very talented. He only learned the basics of the first 2 moves, but only learned the essence of the third move. According to this master, there was another move after this move. Unfortunately, the master taught him later, but he failed to learn it. So much so that he only knows these 3 axes. After playing one set, he will play another set. If he didn't do this, he wouldn't know how to make his next move. Alas, it's not my fault. This master's new book will be released on the 25th, and everyone can read it and find out. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 355. The sparks that the arrow exploded in mid-air lasted for a long time, like a lantern hung in the sky, enough for people within a 30-mile radius to see it. At an abandoned grave not far outside the village, a few fat guys were eating barbecue in their hands when they suddenly saw a light flashing above their heads. "Brother, look, someone is setting off fireworks." Zhu Laozi pointed at the sky and shouted, but the pig boss on the side raised his hand and slapped him in the face. "Bullshit fireworks, these are the arrows from the Kintian prison." "Qin Tianjian? What is that?" Zhu Lao scratched his head and asked with a blank look on his face. The pig boss fiercely gnawed the roasted meat in his mouth, chewing it back and forth. "This is a place that oversees the aliens in the world. This news arrow is a signal to summon the aliens nearby. Anyone who sees it will welcome it. Then should we go and greet him? Our names are not on the roster, so why are we joining in the fun?" Zhu Lao said with a nonchalant expression, obviously not interested in the so-called Kintian prison. In fact, with the decline and decay of the imperial court, the power of Qin Tianjian has also been greatly reduced. If it were placed 100 years ago when Emperor Kong was in power, Qin Tianjian would have sent an arrow, and no one in the world would have dared not follow it. But now, how many strangers are on the roster? Except for the 3 religions, most of the strangers in the world are not on the list. However, the pig boss had different thoughts. He finished the barbecue in his hand in a few mouthfuls and threw the bones into the bonfire. "Let's go and have a look. The signaling arrow must have encountered some trouble at this time. If it's good, let's help, but if the idea is troublesome, we'll leave." No matter how decadent the Datong Imperial Court is, it is still too big to fail. If you can get a job in the Kintian prison, that would be the best. It is better than the status of Lolenciadeo. When the boss spoke, the other 4 brothers naturally obeyed. They all ate the barbecue, stood up and ran towards the direction of the news arrow. They were not the only ones who saw Sunjian. There is a temple 15 miles away called Gile Temple. I don't know when or who built such a temple. The temple is very remote, but there is an endless stream of incense, especially many wealthy squire and landowners who want to come here even if they spend all their wealth, because there is a young monk here named Zen Master Gle. Whenever this monk explains the scriptures, it gives people an immersive illusion, as if they are immersed in the paradise he talks about. At this moment, all these pilgrims were seen in the Buddhist hall, each one listening intoxicatedly, but their eyes were confused and lifeless. At this moment, he suddenly saw the message arrow in the sky blooming with brilliance. After being stunned for a moment, the monk stood up and was about to leave. "Master, where are you going?" Seeing this, several pilgrims stood up and asked. However, the monk glanced at them sideways and said, "Amitabha, the donors will stay here for a while. When the poor monk comes back, he should continue to answer everyone's questions." "Master, let's go with you." These pilgrims were immersed in the blissful world of Buddhism and couldn't extricate themselves. How could they be willing to let the master leave at this moment? They even offered to go with him so that they could always hear the profound meaning of Buddhism explained by the master. "Why?" The monk sighed and nodded. "If you want to go to the paradise, the poor monk has another way." "Any solution?" These pilgrims can already feel the existence of the paradise in Buddhism, and even have the feeling of living in it for many years. Suddenly their thoughts return to reality, which makes them feel that this is an absurd and nihilistic world, and they are eager to return. "Go into your own world." The monk remained silent and slowly clasped his hands together. Suddenly a long sword popped out from his sleeve, and the sword glow made an icy cold light in the dark night. Poof! Blood spattered on the ground, leaving a few spots on the ground. A few big ones. The heads rolled to the ground. Amitabha. The monk sheathed his long sword and turned around to leave the temple. As the monk left, he saw that the temple was rapidly decaying. When he looked again, he saw that the temple was already an abandoned temple. The Buddha statues in the temple had long been broken into pieces. Everything on the ground, trees, etc. was broken. There are numerous corpses and bones. "Grandpa, look, there are stars over there." On the bullock cart, an old man and a young man raised their heads, and the children's young faces were full of joy as they looked at the sparkling fireworks in the distance. The old man smiled, gently put his hand on the child's head and stroked it lovingly a few times. He smiled and said, "My child, it's cold. Go to sleep. When you wake up, Grandpa will pick the star and give it to you." "Good." The child nodded obediently, lay down on the cart obediently, covered himself with a blanket, and soon fell asleep. The old man carefully tucked the child into bed, jumped down from the ox cart, stretched out his hand and gently grabbed the ox cart. The ox and cart turned into a piece of tissue paper, which the old man folded in his hand and carefully put in his bag. Looking again, he saw the news arrow in the distance. The old man took out another piece of paper, put it in his hand and blew lightly. With a sudden shake, the paper stood up, and a horse appeared out of thin air. The technique was so strange and mysterious that it was unbelievable. The old man jumped on his horse, and the horse roared and rushed towards the direction of the arrow. The sky has begun to brighten, and the sun is shining on the earth again. In the open space in the backyard, Su Tong dug a big pit and buried all the bodies of Joe and his team members in it. In fact, team leader Joe was very considerate of his young master. Even when he was on duty, he would go wherever he had free time. "I just didn't expect that they would die so suddenly. Brothers, you have always taken good care of me, but now I am buried in a foreign country. I will definitely give an explanation to your family when I return to the capital. Su Tong said, waving his hand and scattering a wad of money to lead the way. He must have resentment in his heart knowing that team leader Joe and the others were killed brutally. But at this moment, he didn't want to expose his identity as a paper maker, so he didn't resolve the grievances. Instead, he gave them more money and promised that he would treat their families well after returning to Beijing. When I returned to the front yard, I saw Li 11 walking back from outside with a knife in his hand and an ugly face. Master Ma. Li 11 limped over, glanced at the grave in front of him, and looked quite regretful, and said to Su Tong, Master Ma, all those villagers have disappeared. It turned out that Li 11 rested for a while and after regaining some strength, he took a knife and prepared to go to the villagers to settle accounts. As a result, he went from house to house and saw that there was no one in every house. This is originally a village of the dead. Yang Gongjing walked out of the room and said coldly. Sir, did you know earlier? Su Tong looked back at Yang Gongjing. Yang Gongjing shook her head. I don't know, I thought about it for a long time last night before I figured out why the white lanterns are hung in every house. We are afraid that we accidentally entered Village of the Dead. In fact, there are actually not a few such villages. Especially now that there are floods in Henan, foreigners have invaded the country, and they can't get a penny out of the treasury. There are countless villages like this, and it's not uncommon for some weird situations like this to happen occasionally. Qin Tianjian receives at least a dozen memorials about this situation every year, but most of them are sent back to the local government, asking the local government to dispatch special personnel to deal with them. But Yang Gongjing didn't expect that they would encounter such a situation so soon. Sir, what on earth are we going to Lianshan this time? Su Tong knew that this task would definitely not be easy, but before reaching Lianshan, so many people had died. If he continued to go to Lianshan, he didn't know how many situations would arise. It would be unreasonable for him to be a fool again. Yang Gongjing noticed Su Tong's dissatisfaction and glanced outside the door. Let's wait until someone comes. After that, he went back to his room to rest. After waiting for about an hour, they heard the sound of horse hooves outside the door. Li 11 and Su Tong, who had been waiting outside the door early, saw an old man wearing a cloth bag. The old man dismounted and grabbed it with his hand. The living horse turned into a piece of tissue paper and was carried in the old man's arms. This wonderful method made Su Tong's eyes reveal a sparkle. Although he was also playing with paper, it was not like a paper maker's method. After all, no matter how lifelike the paper man is, he cannot become a living thing. Su Mao, the Hedong shadow man, come and report. The old man stepped forward and cupped his hands towards the two of them. As soon as he finished speaking, a burst of laughter was heard in the distance, and 5 strong men with fat heads and big ears were seen walking over from a distance. As they walked, they said, I didn't expect it to happen these days. It's really rare that there are people who can master such occult craftsmanship. When Li 11 saw the 5 people, his heart tightened and he immediately lowered his head. The 5 people stepped forward and said in unison, brothers from the Zhu family who are idol people from Baiyu 5 blessings, if you see Sun Jian, please come and do your part. Oh, it turns out to be Baiyu Wazhu. When the old man heard the names of the 5 people, he had a look of disdain on his face. Many people in the world had heard about the names of these 5 guys. They were even called Green Forest Bandits. They killed people and stole goods, and committed all kinds of evil. Did the government issue a notice to arrest them? I didn't expect them to dare to deliver it to my door themselves. Hearing the old man's sarcastic voice, the 5 of them were not angry. They just squinted their eyes and looked at the old man up and down, with a cold look in their eyes. Put down your butcher's knife and become a Buddha immediately. The 5 donors are willing to come, so they are ready to sacrifice their lives to become a benevolent person. Why don't Donor Su put down his prejudices? Su Tong looked back and saw that it was a monk. The monk was wearing a grey robe, with his hands clasped together. The most surprising thing was that this monk turned out to be barefoot. In the Zen of Rebirth, Hui Yuan came after hearing the news and paid homage to the superior officer of Qin Tianjian. Hui Yuan stepped forward and stood in the way of Su Mao and the Zhu brothers, whether on purpose or intentionally. Yang Gongjing heard the commotion in the room and walked out. After confirming their identities, her face showed joy. I can get your help. This matter is definitely not difficult. I haven't seen Qin Tianjian's news arrow for almost 10 years. This appearance is definitely not a trivial matter. I dare to ask what Shang Guan said, Su Mao asked. The Zhu brothers also pricked up their ears, wanting to find out what was going on first, so that if the idea got into trouble, they could find an excuse to leave. Yang Gongjing thought for a moment, as if holding back her words, and then spoke. Someone saw the Holy Son of White Lotus at Lianshan Temple. It is said that 3,000 ghosts cleared the way for him. The imperial court specially ordered me to rush to Lianshan County to assist the government in the investigation. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 356. Your Majesty, there is news from the palace. The housekeeper handed a piece of paper to him. Prince Gong was playing with the newly bought mina and had no time to pay attention to him. This mina was a Western product and was very interesting. Prince Gong was having fun these days. He glanced at the note from the corner of his eye and motioned for the butler to read it to him. When the butler finished reading it, Prince Gong frowned. Why did another Holy Son of White Lotus appear? The housekeeper stepped forward and cautiously asked, do you think you should have someone get rid of this thing? What is the Holy Son of White Lotus? This is about the White Lotus sect, an organization that fought against the Qing dynasty and restored the Ming dynasty. It is said that this organization once had a close relationship with the third Prince Zhu. At its peak, it had 300,000 followers. Later, after Emperor Kong suppressed it, its core members disappeared. But every few years, there would always be rumors about the White Lotus Sun, the White Lotus Madonna, etc. The court was already used to it, and this time they actually sent out all the people from Kintian prison. Obviously, things may not be that simple. Prince Gong continued to tease Starling, and shook his head when he heard this. It would be a pity to get rid of such a rare thing. Let the Holy Mother of Red Lotus go. The Red Lotus matches the White Lotus, how beautiful it is. The housekeeper nodded after hearing this and was about to leave when Prince Gong called him back. Wait a minute, who did Qin Tianjian ask to go? It's Deputy Superintendent Yang Gongjing. I heard that Fu Anning has been ill recently and has been coughing up blood all day long. People at the Imperial Hospital say he has lung disease. I'm afraid, he won't be able to survive this winter. Hearing this, Prince Gong was stunned for a moment, waved his hand and asked the housekeeper to go down, picked up a small shovel made of gold, and dropped a spoonful of bird food into the mina's cage. It's a pity, from now on, the divination of the 16 hexagrams has been completely lost. Here you go. It's lost, it's lost. Mina shook his head and said imitatively. At this moment, Yang Gongjing, Su Mao, and others looked at each other with troubled expressions on their faces. They are not fools. The reputation of the White Lotus sect in the world is no less than that of the demon sect in novels. This organization is so evil, and it is also involved in the issue of opposing the Qing dynasty and restoring the Ming dynasty, that many people in the Jianghu have stayed away and never dared to get involved easily. Now another Holy Son of White Lotus has popped up. If it were that simple, he could just order the local governor to send troops to destroy him. Why let Qin Tianjian go to assist him? Seeing the expressions on several people's faces, Yang Gongjing knew that it was time to let out blood. First, he looked at the Zhu family brothers and said, "The world is in chaos now and the court is employing people. Since he is a capable person with special skills, why should he wander around in the green forest and sleep in the open? If this is done, I can repair a book Feng, order Shuntian Mansion to remove your wanted documents and recommend you a military position." After speaking, he looked at Monk Huiwen and Su Mao and raised 3 fingers, 3-year merit lantern. Huiwen and Su Mao were both on the roster. Yang Gongjing was not polite to them. 6 simple words were already the biggest condition. Sure enough, after hearing these 6 words, Huiyuan and Su Mao suddenly showed joy on their faces, and nodded in agreement without thinking. Qintianjian has stargazing towers on famous mountains all over the world, which are arranged in conjunction with the stars in the sky. Firstly, it can suppress the dragon veins in the world, and secondly, it is equipped with merit lamps that are eager to be seen by practitioners all over the world. It is said that if you light the merit lamp, a large amount of merit will flow into you every day for 3 years, which is enough to last for several years or even 10 years of hard work. In the event that the emperor holds a grand sacrificial ceremony, a large amount of additional merit will be added. They cannot refuse such a temptation, nor can they refuse it. After all, this kind of treatment, in the past, would not be the turn of strangers like them. In the past, even if Yang Gongjing agreed, it would have to be reported to the imperial court for approval at all levels. But now that Westerners are attacking the country, the emperor is busy carrying out reforms, especially those new schools of thought, which have left the Qintian supervisor with nothing value. Nowadays, the Qintian prison has become an unpopular government office. Not only does the emperor not care about this kind of thing at all, but even if Yang Gongjing plays the excerpt, he will be scolded by the emperor. Being disliked by the emperor is obviously not a good thing, but for Qin Tianjian, it invisibly expands Qin Tianjian's power over foreigners. For things like merit lanterns, you can now make the decision yourself, and you don't need to worry about it as much as before. Yang Gongjing was very satisfied with the attitude of the 2 people. She turned back to look at Su Tong and Li 11, "Let's set off on the road." The 2 nodded, took out the carriage, and the group got on the road again. On the way, Su Tong asked in a low voice about the merit lantern. When Li 11 said it, Su Tong was jealous. The resources occupied by the Datong royal family are simply too rich. There are countless coveted treasures hidden in the huge forbidden palace. It is a pity that there are countless rare treasures in the world, but they can only be reduced to private collections in the palace. If only some of them were taken out, the Datong dynasty would not be so miserable. "Headmaster, be careful about that monk." Dia sent a message to Su Tong at the entrance of the hall, "I'm afraid this monk is already a half-step master." As soon as Dia finished speaking, the monk suddenly noticed something and turned back to look at Su Tong. Su Tong's skin tightened, and he felt as if he was being spied on, but at this time, the passive skill of the black brocade robe uncrowned king was activated. An evil spirit surged out, completely hiding Su Tong's aura. The monk looked carefully for a while, but he couldn't figure out the reason, and he couldn't help but feel a little surprised. But after thinking about it, I felt relieved. After all, if the guards around Lord Qin Tianjian were not capable, how could they accompany him? Huiwen obviously didn't know that all the guards around the Lord died in childbirth last night. Huiwen couldn't tell what Su Tong was doing, so she could only smile and nodded, and continued walking forward as if nothing was wrong. Su Tong then approached Li 11 and asked in a low voice about Su Mao. He was very curious in his heart. The fierce horse Su Mao sat on was obviously a piece of paper, but at this moment it was like a living thing. How on earth could he do this? Converting reality into reality is the skill of a great master. Is it possible that the Su Mao is a person like the master? This is obviously impossible. If he is really a great master, why should he pay attention to Sun Jian's call? Li 11 smiled, "Shadow paper play, Shadow play is a branch of it. In fact, it is also the trick of Shujulikaman. It is said to have originated in the prosperous Tang dynasty and came from the western regions. Later, it was lost for a while. We didn't expect to meet him this time, and our eyes were opened. He, little brother is very knowledgeable. At this time, the pig boss turned around and looked at Lee 11. Lee 11 subconsciously turned his head and cupped his hands and said, "No, I just heard people talk about it occasionally." "Oh." The pig boss nodded, took a closer look at Lee 11 and said, "Little brother, I think you look familiar. I don't know how to call you." Lee 11 was really panicking now. Fortunately, he put a hand on his shoulder and looked up to see Su Tong's smiling face. "This is my good brother, 11er. My name is Ma Hongwen. What do you call this big brother?" Pig boss looked as if he was stunned. He grinned at Su Tong, showing his yellow teeth and said, "Little brother, I am very happy. I like Lao Tzu. We 5 brothers don't have serious names. If you don't mind, just call me Pig Boss, that's it." You're welcome, you're welcome." Su Tong bowed his hands towards the other 4 people. Lee 11 felt relieved when he saw Boss Zhu and the others' attention being diverted. He cast a grateful look at Su Tong. None of the group was good at getting along, so they naturally traveled much faster. They traveled day and night, and there was a sense of competition among them. By early the next morning, we had arrived at the boundary of Lianshan. As a result, as soon as I entered Lianshan County, I saw white lanterns hanging at the door of every house in the county. There were only a few people on the road. When the cold wind blew, it became deserted. This made Su Tong and his party feel a little nervous, almost thinking that they had broken into the dead man's county. Fortunately, after asking around, I found out that the county town has been very haunted recently. Someone gave everyone an idea, saying that as long as you hang a white lantern at your door, you will be protected from evil spirits. Now every house has hung up white lanterns. Madness. After Yang Gongjing learned about the incident, he cursed the county magistrate for being incompetent and allowing such monstrous words to run rampant. In his opinion, this was pure nonsense and must be a conspiracy of the White Lotus sect. So with a dark face, he hurried to the county government office. Finally, when I arrived at the gate of the county government office, I saw, my dear, while others were hanging too, this one actually had 4. Not only were there 4 white lanterns hanging on it, but the drumsticks on the side were also painted white. This made Yang Gongjing's nose crooked with anger. She took out her identity documents and motioned for Lee 11 to go up and call the door. Before Lee 11 could call the door to come in, he saw that the door of the yamen had already been opened. A group of government officials were carrying several corpses out. When they saw Lee 11, they were startled. "Who are you?" Lee 11 took out the door sign with a dark face and threw it into the arms of the yamen servant. "Master Qin Tianjian is here, ask your master to come and greet him quickly." The officials were shocked when they heard this. After looking at each other, they quickly sent someone to report the news. Su Tong came over and took a look at the corpse that the government officials had brought out. He opened the cloth cover and saw that it was a middle-aged man, but his neck had been broken. "How is this going?" "Master Qi, this is a wealthy family in the county. But last night, he said that he encountered an evil spirit and his throat was twisted. Several of his friends also died together." The guard hurriedly explained. Su Tong walked over and checked them one by one, and without exception, they were all killed in one move. However, at this time, he noticed that except for the first corpse, the palms of the other corpses were very rough. Seeing this, he glanced sideways at the yamen officer. Although the other person's face was expressionless, his wandering eyes clearly showed a guilty conscience. "Oh, that's it? You can carry it away." He nodded and signaled to the government officials that they could carry the body away. The government officials breathed a sigh of relief and immediately carried the body out. They put the body on the cart and pulled the body directly into a side alley. After making sure that no one was following behind, they wiped the cold sweat from their faces. "Why did you come so fast? Something almost happened," a government official cursed. It's okay. Let's get rid of the body quickly. Everyone, please be careful. If anyone shows off, be careful that the hall master will turn his back on you." After the other Yamen officer finished speaking, several people did not dare to delay and quickly left with the cart. But they didn't notice that a huge mouse quietly poked half of its head out of the corner and heard what they just said clearly. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 357. Cai Boying, a humble employee, pays homage to Shang Guan. The magistrate of Lianshan County is surprisingly young, looking fair, probably in his early 20s. As soon as Yang Gongjing entered the door, she had a dark face. She showed no mercy at all and started scolding her whenever she opened her mouth. "You read the books of sages in vain. How can you believe in the evil ways of the world, but you don't know that you are silent and have strange power to confuse the gods?" Yang Gongjing sat on the chair of the county government official and began to scold him sternly. Despite his age, he was very timid and looked very tired from driving all night, but when it came to swearing, he was very energetic. Yang Gongjing was a 6th-rank official in the current dynasty, and even a capital official. However, for a small county magistrate, he was only a 7th-rank petty official. Yang Gongjing's scoldings could be unpleasant. The young county magistrate below was also confused by the scolding. He stared blankly at Yang Gongjing, scolding him from the beginning to the end, from his ancestors to his descendants. He even had to dig up his family's graves and dig out their ancestors before scolding them. Gee! There are only 3 questions in my mind: who am I, where am I, and why don't I chop him to death? The government officials standing aside were dumbfounded as they looked at the young man's hands tightly clenched into fists, and suddenly felt a cold sweat in their hearts. Afraid that the hall master wouldn't be able to bear it anymore, he just drew his sword and chopped the old guy down. Su Tong stood silently next to Yang Gongjing, gloating about the county magistrate standing below with a dull face, and secretly snickering in his heart. Yang Gongjing cursed for almost an hour before finally venting all her sullenness. She took the cup and took a sip of tea. "Tell me what's going on in Lianshan Temple." Maybe it was because he was scolded that he was a little stupid, but Cai Boying was still in a daze and was stunned for a moment after hearing this. Seeing Yang Gongjing glare, she hurriedly said, "Master Qi, every night in Lianshan Temple, ghosts cry and wolves howl, and nearby villagers have seen the scene of Yin soldiers clearing the way more than once, and they all say it is. What is it? Say it quickly." "It's the reincarnation of the 3rd Prince Zhu, who has returned with the Ming Dynasty Forbidden Army." Cai Boying whispered. "That's nonsense. Prince Zhu San was wiped out as early as Emperor 11's reign. The remnants of the White Lotus sect fled to death. How could a holy son of White Lotus appear? Can you send someone in to investigate?" Yang Gongjing put down the teacup in her hand, feeling more and more displeased with this pretty boy. "But I also know in my heart that there are so many county magistrates in the world, and most of them are just people. A small, remote county is bigger than a sesame seed in the territory of Datong. Most of the magistrates in such a place are he was bought with money, and if he doesn't cause harm to the village, even if God opens his eyes, it's just a fool's errand to expect him to accomplish anything." Fortunately, Cai Boying also noticed Yang Gongjing's dissatisfied look and said quickly, "We went in to check, and 3 waves of people came in." "Oh, what's the result?" Yang Gongjing raised her head and asked. "They're all dead." Hearing this, Yang Gongjing slapped the table. "Idiot! You are such a huge idiot. What do you do if the imperial court raises you? Prepare food, hot water, and a room. If you still can't handle this, Get out of here. The corners of Cai Boying's mouth twitched a few times, and she resisted the urge to take out the machete and chop the old guy, and walked out of the door with a dark face. After sending Cai Boying away, Yang Gongjing called Su Tong and the others to her side and lowered her voice, "Be careful, something is wrong here. Everyone. There's something wrong with this place, they can tell it as long as they're not blind. Even the Zhu brothers have noticed something, not to mention Su Mao and Monk Huiwen, so you need to remind them." Fortunately, Yang Gongjing was not a loser. She took out a few charms and gave them to Su Tong and the others. Su Tong threw them into the prop book and took a look. Unexpectedly, they were still good things. Taishan Prayer Star Talisman, 1/1. When the wearer encounters an attack with evil attributes, the shield will be automatically activated to neutralize the enemy's attack. Obviously this is a one-time prop, but the effect doesn't seem to be bad. Yang Gongjing arranged for everyone to take turns to rest, and went to Lianshan Temple early tomorrow morning to find out what was going on, and then let everyone disperse. On the other side of the kitchen, several loud slaps were heard. Cai Boying, no, I should say Xinbai, the patron of Balian Church. His face, which was still handsome, had all the features twisted into a ball. "This old man, I will chop off his head sooner or later to make a chamber pot. What bad idea did you come up with? This made me scolded by this old man." In front of Gu Zhenbei was an old man who couldn't hold his head up after being scolded. After he finished scolding, he whispered, "Master, the overall situation is more important. The chief helmsman has already calculated that when the Holy Sun comes to this world, there will be disaster. Right now, the Holy Sun is trapped in Lianshan Temple, and we can't get in. If we don't use the power of Qin Tianjian, how can we welcome the Holy Sun back?" Hearing what the old man said, Gu Zhenbei's face was full of anger, but he had no choice but to do anything. After saying that, he suddenly saw a few mice crawling in the corner. A cold look appeared in Gu Zhenbei's eyes. With a flick of his finger, a silver needle hit one of them. The mouse was nailed to the wall, and he gritted his teeth and said, "That's all. Spare that old man for a while. When the Holy Sun is welcomed back, he will be cut into pieces." At night, after everyone had eaten, they went to rest in the backyard room. Thinking about it, Yang Gongjing knew in her heart that no one in this group was a fuel-efficient lamp, and each of them disliked the other, so she simply let them sleep separately. Li 11 and Su Tong shared a room, right next to Yang Gongjing's bedroom. In order to be sure, Su Tong asked Ji Xiang to control all the rats around him early and become his eyeliners to ensure that if there was any trouble, he would be the first. Time knows. After Su Tong saved Li 11's life, Li 11 was no longer wary of Su Tong and sat in the room chatting with Su Tong. He didn't say where he was, he just said that he was hunted by his enemies and had to hide in the Forbidden Palace. Su Tong didn't ask any more questions. Instead, he shook his head and said regretfully, saying that if you had known me earlier, you might not have to enter the palace. I will arrange a job for you, which is not as comfortable as being a eunuch. The corner of Li 11's mouth twitched a few times, but he just thought it was Su Tong's casual remark, and he was thinking in his heart, how could he have known so much in the world? If he had known, I would not have impulsively betrayed mission. Su Tong pretended to be casual, but he stared at the subtle changes in Li 11's face and snickered in his heart. As soon as the conversation changed, he asked Li 11 if he knew the 5 pigs. Oh, Li 11's eyes darkened when he mentioned this, and he nodded without denying, they were among the people who were chasing me back then, but I was clever enough to avoid it, otherwise I would have been beheaded by them long ago. After speaking, he lowered his voice, pulled Su Tong and said, "Brother Ma, my brother wants revenge, can you help me?" Su Tong immediately patted his chest, "Of course, I will definitely help you with this matter." With Su Tong's guarantee, Li 11 felt more at ease. He kept on going even though he was injured, and fell asleep after saying a few words. Su Tong was lying on another bed. As soon as he lay down, a cold wind blew over. It was Ji Xiang who came back to the entrance of the hall. He lay on the entrance and said to Su Tong, "Another group of people are coming outside." Boom, boom, boom. A banging on the door woke everyone up. The Yamen officer opened the door and cursed with a dark face, "You blind thing, you are going to die for your father in the middle of the night." As soon as he finished speaking, there was a rapid sound of "pa," and a slap on the Yamen servant's face, sending the Yamen servant flying away. The door was pushed open, and a group of guards wearing black cloaks and holding swords rushed in. Yang Gongjing and Gu Zhenbei hurriedly led people out. I saw a woman walking up to the two of them, taking off a sign from her waist and throwing it to Yang Gongjing. "I have been given an edict that the words of Holy Sun Balian are lies to deceive the public. We are specially sent here to arrest Holy Sun Balian, you will assist in handling the case." Gu Zhenbei held the sign and looked at it for a long time without understanding anything. Yang Gongjing kicked him with a look of disgust and took the sign over. Then when he looked at the light, his expression suddenly changed. He hurriedly greeted him and knelt down and shouted, "I accept the decree and thank you, my emperor, long live, long live, long live, long live." Now let alone Su Tong, who was confused, Gu Zhenbei and the others were also confused. Why did two waves of people come? But when Su Tong looked up, his expression suddenly became strange. "I saw the woman leading the group, wasn't she from the Red Lantern cult who burned down the church and massacred foreigners last time?" Although the woman's large cloak covered half of her face, Su Tong recognized her at a glance with the help of Minji and Kimin. "Good guy, the Red Lantern sect, the White Lotus sect, the Kintian prison, and if Li 11 and a bunch of strangers are added to this place will be so busy that it will turn into a pot of porridge." Gu Zhenbei came forward with a grin and was about to speak when he heard a man's voice from behind asking, "You are the county magistrate? Who asked you to hang white lanterns in every house? You are so weird and crazy." Gu Zhenbei was startled. Why did these words sound so familiar? He looked up and asked, "Who are you?" I saw a young man dressed as a scholar walking out from behind the woman, with a pair of glasses on his face. "I am a new student, Zhao Sisan, and I am here to expose the deceptions of you ghosts and snake gods." The woman stood behind the man and introduced, "This is a new student specially sent from above to help you." Just as Gu Zhenbei was about to step forward to say a few words of courtesy, he saw Zhao Sisan's face darken. "It's untrue that you are the esteemed person of the county, but you would believe such exaggerated lies and ignore the people's livelihood. You were born to be a son of man, but you are in vain to be a minister. I'm sorry, your majesty's favor, I'm sorry for the country, I'm sorry for the people." Gu Zhenbei was dumbfounded and looked sideways at the old man in the corner. He saw the old man pursed his lips and shook his head, silently taking out an orange from his sleeve and holding it in his hand. "Hall master, the overall situation is the most important thing. In terms of scolding skills, Zhao Sisan was not much worse than Yang Gongjing. He scolded Gu Zhenbei until his face was blue at the end, and everyone was numb from the scolding. Only then did Zhao Sisan let out a long sigh and said, he looked like he had vented all his anger. It was still the familiar process of lighting a fire and cooking, but the county government office was so big, and they didn't have any extra rooms. Gu Zhenbei and others could only vacate the houses where they lived, and then squeezed into the woodshed with aggrieved expressions and made do with it. One night. This was destined to be a tragic night for Gu Zhenbei and others, but it was also destined to be a sleepless night. Li 11 slipped out in the middle of the night. According to the mouse surveillance sent by Jixiang, this guy seemed to have gone out to report a message to someone. In addition, the Red Lantern sex group was not honest at all. They set out separately and went from house to house, replacing the white lanterns with red lanterns. I don't know if they had any obsession with colors. Even the 5 pigs stayed awake in the middle of the night and took aim at the horses in the backyard. They even stole 2 horses and roasted them. All in all, it was a wild night. Seeing that he couldn't sleep anymore, Su Tong simply lit a stick of yellow incense, narrowed his eyes, and escaped into the entrance of his hall. When he came to his own treasure furnace, under the enthusiastic and expectant eyes of Daya and the other 3, he took out the internal elixir of evil and threw it tentatively into the furnace. I saw the inner elixir approaching the stove, and it immediately turned into a cloud of smoke and was sucked into the stove. There's a show. The eyes of Su Tong and the 4 others were shining brightly, and their hearts began to look forward to it. Soon the stove began to glow red, and an indescribable smell filled the air. One whiff made my whole body feel itchy. They were so frightened that they hid outside the hall and waited for about 10 minutes. There was a bang sound in the stove. Su Tong and the other 4 immediately rushed in and carefully opened the secret compartment under the stove. A black-green pill appeared in the secret compartment. The elixir was glowing with a metallic purple light, colorless and odorless. As soon as he got the elixir, Su Tong immediately felt a strong hunger for it. It was as if this thing was not a pill, but a bunch of freshly baked mutton skewers, exuding a fragrance that he couldn't resist. This feeling made Su Tong's heart move. He resisted the urge to swallow the elixir, took it out and threw it into the prop book, and got the information about it. Wuxinden. Use the human heart as a furnace, use flesh and blood as the forging material, use resentment as the medicine, and the elixir will become a black heart. Those who eat it have no heart. Those who eat it can increase their own dark attribute power, such as curse power, demon power, magic power, etc. If it is not dark attribute power, eating it will deduct their own strength. After reading the introduction of the elixir, Su Tong sighed inwardly. Judging from the introduction, the monster Sangwei was probably deliberately created by someone with a heart. It's unclear which evil sect used this method to refine this evil elixir. After all, in today's world where people are in dire straits, all kinds of demons and evil ways are trying to come out and jump around. Su Tong did not choose to share this elixir with Daya and the others, because this thing was obviously something that the dark physique desperately needed, otherwise his body would not have such a strong hunger to urge him to eat it. He discussed with Daya and the others and said that he would compensate them from other places. Although Daya and the other 3 are very greedy, they have no objections to this. After all, Su Tong is the leader, and as the leader, the stronger the better. In this case, Su Tong was not polite and swallowed the elixir in one gulp. The elixir was surprisingly bitter in his mouth, as if he had eaten a coptis. There was also a turmoil in the stomach. Although this elixir had the ability to increase strength, it obviously required a digestion process. But Su Tong couldn't wait that long and directly activated the heart of the abyss. With the activation of the heart of the abyss, a black mist surged out of Su Tong's body and instantly swallowed the pills in his stomach directly. At the same time, Su Tong's eyes suddenly darkened, and a bottomless abyss appeared in his pupils. At the same time, a sneaky whisper sounded in his ears. "Sorry, I'm not in the mood today. I'll take a moment to collect my thoughts." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 358. When you are staring into the abyss is also staring at you. Just like the preface of Dark Physique, those who are close to the darkness will eventually be swallowed up by the darkness. Su Tong's vision went dark, followed by a sudden feeling of weightlessness. His body seemed to have stepped on nothing, and his whole body seemed to have fallen into an abyss. As he fell rapidly, Su Tong felt calm inside, and even looked around curiously. He knew that this situation must have occurred because his dark physique had been further improved after taking the Wuxin pill. Since it is a problem caused by the improvement of prop cards, there is no need to worry about your own safety. After all, I have never heard of a situation where the improvement of prop cards ended up killing yourself. During the fall, He actually saw a river, but it was not the yellow spring he was familiar with, but a river burning with flames. On the river, you can occasionally see small boats driving on them. The boatman, shrouded in a black robe, held an oil lamp in his hand. The weak light on the river full of flames actually gave people an extremely clear sense of vision. The boatmen seemed to have noticed something. They turned around silently and raised the oil lamps in their hands towards Su Tong. But before they noticed Su Tong's existence, Su Tong had already disappeared into the bottomless abyss. Inside. When the flaming river disappeared, black scorched earth appeared in front of him, and the ground was covered with black bugs. Su Tong had never seen such bugs before. If he really had to describe it, he could only say that it looked very similar to a watermelon bug. Huge crosses were planted all over the ground. Some unknown giant corpses were hung on it, and countless dense insects were climbing on these corpses, as if eating the corpses above. The corpses had long mouths, as if they were screaming in pain, but unfortunately they erect their mouths. I listened for a long time but didn't hear anything. Gradually some strange creatures began to appear around Su Tong. It seemed that he had smelled the scent of living things and began to swim towards him. However, when they got closer, a black mist surged out of Su Tong's body, forming a black goat's head above his head. Immediately, these creatures dispersed in a rush, as if Su Tong was the more terrifying existence in their eyes. At this time, a ray of beating fire suddenly appeared in front of Su Tong's eyes. The fire was getting closer and closer, and a slender white hand reached out from the flames, grabbed Su Tong's body and lifted him out of the flames. When the fire light dissipated, Su Tong couldn't help but raise his head and looked at the mountain in front of him. Hi, it's so white. The huge palm slowly lifted Su Tong in front of him, and the blurry face gradually became clear. The rich flaxen blonde hair, and the deep eyes seemed to have two dark red flames beating. The woman's nose is high, but what's more striking is her scarlet lips, with a dangerous but seductive smile. But Su Tong also noticed the pair of black wings on the woman's back. After seeing the woman's face clearly, Su Tong was stunned for a moment, then stood up. Ahem, sorry, I took the wrong route. The Lord of Hell next door is waiting for me to report. After saying that, he wanted to jump off the woman's hand, but when the woman waved her hand, Su Tong's vision blurred. When he came back to his senses, he found that he was sitting in front of a bar. The woman who was naked just now has now transformed into a white kitchen outfit. I haven't had a guest for a long time. Now that you are here, please taste my cooking skills. As the woman spoke, she began to work in the kitchen. Seeing that he couldn't leave, Su Tong could only look at the surrounding kitchen environment curiously. Well, it's quite unique. It would be even better if the skulls hanging above could be replaced with onions and garlic, and paired with 2 bunches of red peppers. Bang 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 bang, gee. Along with the rising oil smoke, the flame exploded in the hot pot, forming air waves visible to the naked eye, carrying a heart-wrenching fragrance. The extremely simple ingredients are now undergoing a process of turning decay into magic under a pair of white hands. The crystal-clear rice noodles are wrapped in beef and neatly stacked on the plate. A spoonful of ignited hot wine is poured on it, and the light blue flame is covered on it, which not only emits a special feeling. The aroma of wine gives the rice noodles a unique texture. Volcano River. The dinner plate was placed on the table, and Su Tong couldn't help but look a little weird. I thought you would serve me a Western dish. The woman grinned her bright red lips, handed a pair of chopsticks to Su Tong and said, actually, I prefer cooking French food. Su Tong casually picked up the chopsticks and put it into his mouth. When he entered the mouth of the rice noodles, the taste was beyond his expectation. After being burned with strong liquor, the rice noodles had a crispy texture, but after eating it, it became very chewy. Tooth. The rolled beef and vegetable cubes inside form a distinct sense of layering, which progresses layer by layer as you chew, until a faint aroma of wine is left at the end. Tasty. It was the first time for Su Tong to eat such amazing food. Even though he knew that what he was eating was not real food, and it might even be an illusion that only existed in his mind, he couldn't miss such delicious food. The delicious taste of ingredients often comes from their own taste. Our tongues can taste the 5 flavors of sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and fresh, but there are many kinds of flavors in the world. The chef slowly took off the chef's hat on his head, and his thin white hands caressed Su Tong's ears. His fingers seemed to draw a wisp of smoke from Su Tong's body, and he put it under the bridge of his nose and took a sip. As this wisp of green smoke poured into the woman's nasal cavity, the woman slowly closed her eyes, as if she was tasting a glass of old wine. For a moment, she smacked her lips. It has a very strange taste, more so than I expected. Unique. As he spoke, he looked at Su Tong's neck with unfulfilled interest. If you were used as an ingredient, I think it would be an amazing delicacy. Su Tong was stunned for a moment, and then continued to eat. This dish tasted really good, even better than the delicacies at the exhibition. The only drawback was that the quantity was too small, and it tasted a bit unsatisfactory. He picked up the napkin on the table and wiped the corner of his mouth. I'm sorry, as an excellent gourmet, president of the Chinese Food Association, and food critic of the Bashu Heavenly Kingdom, I feel that although your cooking skills have reached a very high level, it is not suitable for you. There is still a lack of understanding in the handling of ingredients. Oh. The woman looked stunned for a moment. She had seen many human beings. When these humans saw her, they said all kinds of things. They were afraid, begging for mercy, and even read the Bible and prayed. There were also some who were bold and even prayed to her. Take your own oaths of courtship, allegiance, etc. But only Su Tong's comments exceeded her expectations. The most important thing is that the smell of this man is so unique. His pursed lips turned up unconsciously, and he stretched out his white and soft palm and dragged it on Su Tong's chin. What about? Su Tong removed her hand from her chin and placed it on her chest. For example, you can try giving the ingredients a full body massage first. The woman rolled her eyes at him. I am not an inferior creature that eats human flesh. After saying that, she couldn't help but take a sip on Su Tong's neck. There was a hint of fire hidden deep in her eyes. I'm looking forward to cooking your soul. After speaking, he placed his palm on Su Tong's chest and pushed hard. A powerful force instantly poured into Su Tong's body. At the same time, the scene in front of him began to regress rapidly, as if he was about to be pushed out of the abyss. Remember my name, Satan Lilith, take my reward and go away, but when you die, I will grant your trivial wish. Watching Su Tong's retreating figure, a burst of cheerful laughter erupted in the kitchen. When the demons in hell heard this burst of laughter, they all lowered their heads in horror, not daring to make a single sound for fear of becoming her new toy. When Su Tong opened his eyelids from the bed, the laughter from YYC was still echoing in his ears. Oh, I'm finally awake. The 3 big boys in the hall were almost scared to death. When they saw Su Tong woke up, they finally breathed a sigh of relief. After asking, I found out that a goat's head suddenly appeared on Su Tong's body just now. He opened his mouth, picked up his soul, and disappeared without a trace. Ya and the others were almost scared out of their wits. They didn't know what was going on. They were afraid that Su Tong's soul would not come back within the time of burning incense, and then he would really become a dead person. If Su Tong died, they would be buried with him. Su Tong shook his head and couldn't help but smack the corner of his mouth a few times, as if he was still savoring the taste of the fried beef river just now. But he quickly remembered something and quickly called out the prop book. I saw that the entry for Dark Constitution had changed its appearance. Dark Physique, Max, Soulbound, cannot be traded or sold. For those who are beyond redemption, death is just the beginning of pain. Cherish every day you live. Passive Skill 1, Dark Body. The wearer will have a special physical effect and be reduced by 60% when receiving dark damage such as poison, black spells, and curses. Note, when you receive damage from justice systems such as Holy, Light, Talisman, etc., the damage will be increased by 30%. Passive Skill 2, Night God's Caress. At night or in a dark environment, all your dark skills will temporarily gain a 45% increase in power and reduce the cooldown by 25%. Note, in daylight or extremely bright environments, all your dark skills will be temporarily weakened by 20%. Special Skill 3, Lilith's Curse. If you are immune to mental control below level 4, you can quickly recover from your own damage by sucking blood, but a portion of your lifespan will be deducted each time you suck blood. Note, your unique soul has attracted Lilith's favor. She is looking forward to what your face will be like when you walk into her kitchen next time. Looking at the dark physique at full level, Su Tong raised the corners of his mouth, and suddenly felt a sense of success in his free prostitution. While all dark damage was reduced by 60%, the damage from the light justice system only increased by 30%. Even the passive of Night God's Caress was greatly strengthened. The power is increased by 45% and the cooldown is reduced by 25%. The cost is only a 20% weakening during the day. As for the last skill, it is immune to mental control below level 4, and can even heal its own wounds by sucking blood, but the effect is powerful enough. As for the cost, it is negligible. When the day comes, worshipping Shankao will probably reach a level between reality and reality. By then, he should be able to knock on the door of the King of Hell's house like the Master and want his own soul. Tell her to go and go with the Lord of Hell. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 359. In the capital city, inside the Forbidden Palace. Cough 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 cough. A fierce cough echoed in Qin Tianjian's office like a broken bellows. Under the candlelight, Fu Anning, wearing a pair of reading glasses, was flipping through the pages of the book in his hand, comparing meteorological data from various places. In addition to monitoring strangers in the world, Qin Tianjian also needs to observe celestial phenomena, calculate solar terms, formulate calendars, and other tasks. Normally, Yang Gongjing can help with these tasks when Yang Gongjing is around, but now the burden falls on Fu Anning alone. My lord, please drink some hot tea. A young eunuch brought the tea obediently, not daring to put it on the table for fear that the water stains from the tea would accidentally stain the table full of official documents. Fu Anning nodded, took the tea and took a sip. While Fu Anning was drinking tea, the little eunuch picked up a silver needle and gently flicked the wick of the oil lamp a few times to make the light brighter. While holding the lamp, he asked, "Sir, other places have installed foreign lanterns, why don't we install one? I see that in other palaces, the lights are very bright." Fu Anning put down the teacup and glanced at the little eunuch. This little eunuch named Xiao Litzi was one of the few people who made him feel most comfortable. Compared with the bright lights in the Ministry of Household Affairs and the Ministry of Rights, the surrounding area of Qintian prison is pitch black. Since foreign electric lights were used in the palace, the huge Forbidden Palace will always be as gorgeous as daytime every night. But only Qin Tianjian always maintained the habit of using candles. The Ministry of Household Affairs mentioned several times that they would install foreign lanterns for the Qin Tian prison, but Fu Anning refused. In the words of Emperor Daitong, it is stubborn and stubborn. Fu Anning refused to accept foreign electric lights, not because he wanted to save electricity for the emperor, nor because he looked down on foreign electric lights. He was not Yang Gongjing, and he did not have the concept of hatred towards Westerners. He looked at Xiao Litzi and asked with a smile, "Let me ask you, what is the difference between humans and ghosts?" Xiao Litzi thought for a while after hearing this, people are alive, ghosts are dead. Fu Anning nodded, yes, what's the difference between demons and humans? Xiao Litzi laughed dryly and shook his head. He 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 he. Fu Anning smiled. In fact, when Fu Anning laughed, it still gave people a very comfortable feeling, but he rarely smiled on weekdays. Humans, ghosts, even demons, each have their own way of living. Humans live in the day, ghosts walk at night, and monsters and ghosts hide in the mountains and forests. After Fu Anning finished speaking, he glanced at the oil lamp nearby and saw a moth flapping its wings around the lamp. Foreign electric lamps are good things, but not all of them are good. Just like this moth, it is obviously afraid of fire, but it always likes to get close to the lamp. But if it really touches the fire, it will be burned to death in a moment. Xiao Litzi lowered his head and pondered for a while. He was confused and didn't understand it at all, but Fu Anning didn't continue to explain. Although Xiao Litzi didn't understand what Fu Anning meant, his ability to observe words and emotions was already very good. When he saw that Fu Anning didn't seem to want to talk anymore, he immediately walked out with a teacup. On the way out, Xiao Litzi was still wondering what Master Fu's words meant. After taking only 2 steps, a light suddenly hit his face. Oh, this is the damn one. Xiao Litzi quickly raised his hands to cover his eyes and cursed. As soon as the lights went out, 2 little eunuchs ran out from behind the door with a smile. Xiao Litzi took a look and recognized the 2 little eunuchs. One was called a small stool and the other was called a small table. This doesn't sound like a person's name, does it? But the eunuchs in the palace, to put it harshly, are no longer human beings. When the palace maid reaches old age, she can still be sent out of the palace to find a good family to marry, but when the eunuch is old and returns home, his family will dislike him. If he does not return home, he will not even have any descendants, so he has no choice but to go and guard the tomb of the late emperor. People who have no family and no roots will not be able to enter the ancestral hall even after they die. Even in this palace, in front of the masters, they are just tools, tables, stools, and pots, that's what they are called. Where do these 2 young eunuchs belong? It's no other place, but the most lucrative treasure house, the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Most of the treasures paid tribute are kept in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, which is the emperor's small treasury. The country's annual taxes and property belong to the treasury, and the emperor cannot tamper with them easily, otherwise the ministers in the court will not be happy. During festivals, silver rewards should be given out and clothes should be purchased for the concubines. All the miscellaneous expenses had to come from the Ministry of Internal Affairs. These 2 young eunuchs are from the Ministry of Internal Affairs. They usually have a good relationship with Xiao Litzi, but today they secretly took out the emperor's treasure. Quick, let me show you this baby. I saw a small table and a flower pot-like thing in my hand. There was a mechanism underneath. After twisting it, light emitted from it. This is the hand lamp that the Westerners paid tribute to Lord Long Live. Look at how bright it is, but it only lights up for a short time at a time and then goes out. The little table introduced the origin of this hand lamp to Xiao Litzi. When Xiao Litzi took a look, it was true. When the light shone over, the whole road lit up. Hey, this thing is so rare little Plum couldn't put it down while holding the lamp. No, be careful not to break it. If it breaks, we won't have enough heads to chop it off. Little Stool reminded. At this time, Xiao Litzi didn't know what he was thinking. He turned around and handed the teacup to the small table. I'll borrow this for a while and return it to you tomorrow morning. Hey, I'm afraid this is not good. Xiao Zou's expression changed slightly and he quickly stopped him. But Xiao Litzi waved his hand and said, what's wrong? The longevity is only fresh for a while. Once it's fresh, I'll leave it there and don't use it. I'll give it back to you a long time ago. It's in broad daylight. What are you afraid of? If it's really bad, yes, it's because the foreign stuff is not strong. This. The table and stools looked at each other, but Little Plum didn't care so much. He waved them back and ran back holding the lamp. Quietly, he entered the gate of Kintian prison. As soon as he entered the door, he heard Fu Anning's voice, "Little Plum, what's wrong? Hey, sir, you really have eyes and ears in all directions. I came in on tiptoe, and you could hear it too." Little Plum quickly flattered him, then took the hand lamp over and said, "Sir, I want to show you a treasure." "Baby." Fu Anning was also happy. He put down the pen in his hand and stepped forward to see what kind of treasure it was. "Look, my lord." Xiao Litzi grinned, turned the switch on the base of the hand lamp, and suddenly a beam of light shone on the dome of the Kintian prison. There are 8 large mirrors hanging on the dome of the Kintian prison, which are said to be used for divination. No one knows exactly how they are used, but they will be illuminated by the light. Suddenly the entire Kintian prison lit up, giving people a feeling of bright sky. "Sir, look, you, Sir. Sir." Little Plum looked back and saw that Fu Anning, who was standing behind him just now, had disappeared. Now Little Plum was confused. How could such a good person suddenly disappear? In doubt, Xiao Litzi suddenly felt that he had stepped on something. When he lowered his head and looked, he was immediately stunned. He saw that the adult was gone, but the clothes on the adult's body were scattered on the ground. Even if you want to go home, there is no need to take off your clothes so cleanly. Xiao Litzi stayed for a while, and then a direct gust of cool wind blew over him. It was so cold that he couldn't help but shiver, and he suddenly started to feel scared. My lord, my lord." After shouting twice more, no one was seen. Xiao Litzi panicked for a moment and shouted twice towards the door, "Come quickly, someone is here quickly." As soon as he finished speaking, the lamp in his hand went out. Just after experiencing the strong light, it suddenly became dark again. Little Li Zi felt that his eyes suddenly went dark, so dark that he couldn't see his fingers. Little Plum trembled in his heart, and he took a step forward and wanted to run out. However, suddenly a hand came from behind, grabbed his braid, and pulled him back hard. Little Plum sat on the ground with his head facing his head. He rubbed his eyes and took a closer look, only to see that Fu Anning, who had just disappeared, appeared in front of him again, even with his clothes on. It's just that the face that was usually kind to him was terrifyingly cold at the moment. "Sir, sir." Xiao Litzi's scalp felt numb and his heart thumped. The more he thought about it, the more panicked he became. "Hey, Little Plum, you didn't understand a word of what I just said." Fu Anning sighed, slowly squatted down, reached out and patted Xiao Litzi on the shoulder. "Forget it, in the next life, be a complete human being." After saying that, Xiao Litzi's eyes widened and he heard the footsteps of the Imperial Guard coming from outside. He was about to call someone, but when he opened his mouth, the world in front of him suddenly started to spin. Poof, with a sound, his head fell to the ground and rolled. Little Li Zi's eyes widened. Perhaps because of his death, there was nothing in his blurred vision. Mr. Fu stood there. What was in front of his body was clearly a piece of human skin. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 360. The county government office in Lianshan County was filled with a strange atmosphere early in the morning. The new school, Qin Tianjian, Red Lantern Sect, White Lotus Sect, plus a group of strangers. Sitting at the same table to eat, although there are no words between each other, the eyes between each other are full of various sounds. Even 5 pigs like the Zhu brothers began to eat slowly at this time, for fear of making any noise. Su Tong casually took 2 bites of the so-called noodles and immediately lost his appetite. After all, after tasting Lilith's volcano Ox River last night, Eating these now felt like chewing wax. I really want to have another meal. He couldn't help but sigh in a low voice. Li 11 was stunned for a moment and looked at Su Tong with a confused face. What did Brother Ma say? He, Su Tong grinned and did not explain anything to Li 11. Ahem. On the side, Yang Gongjing frowned and glared at Su Tong with an unhappy expression. This is not the capital. There are not so many delicacies from the mountains and seas. If you don't want to eat, just bring the charcoal stove in. It was already the beginning of winter, and even though everyone was wearing thick clothes, it was still very cold in the morning. Okay. Su Tong stood up, patted Li 11 with his hand, and motioned for Li 11 to follow him. The two walked outside, carefully lifted the heated charcoal stove and moved it into the room. They took a look at the hot flames in the charcoal stove. With a flick of his finger, he threw a dark pill in. He winked at Li 11 and walked out the door. Li 11 didn't know what Su Tong was going to do, but he followed him obediently. The two walked to the corner, and Su Tong casually took out an apple and handed it to him, asking where he went last night. Li 11 took the apple and quickly took a bite. Although she didn't know where the apple came from, it was a rare blessing that there were still apples to eat in the season. After taking a bite, I just felt that the apple was fresh and sweet, and it was countless times more delicious than the apples in the palace. I thought that rich people would enjoy it. After looking around to make sure there was no one around, he whispered, I always feel that this place is not safe, and that group of women are not fuel efficient, so I quietly sent a message to my 3 brothers last night to let them know. They came to pick me up. You still have brothers? Su Tong widened his eyes and looked surprised. Li 11 couldn't help showing a bit of pride and said, I met them by chance when I was running for my life. We hit it off right away, so we became brothers of the opposite sex. Mr. Ma, don't worry, these 3 brothers of mine are all masters of extraordinary means. Oh, that's good, that's good. Su Tong had a look of relief on his face, and he couldn't help but sneer secretly in his heart, looking forward to seeing his old friends more and more. Brother Ma. Li 11 gnawed on the apple, with a look of worry on her face. We are going to Lianshan Temple later. Although there may be nothing going on during the day, I always feel uneasy in my heart. Now that so many people have suddenly arrived, Li 11 knows that the people in the new school are a bunch of fools. Moreover, the magistrate of Lianshan County does not seem to be a fuel-efficient lamp. Such a young magistrate has only one person under his command. They are both powerful, and they look like a group of martial artists. If Li 11 could still feel at ease, that would be like seeing a ghost. Su Tong knew what Li 11 was worried about, so he patted him on the shoulder and said, Don't worry, you just need to help me keep Master Yang. I will take care of the rest. You. Li 11 looked at Su Tong, wondering what Mr. Ma was planning in his mind. However, Li 11 had seen that Mr. Ma's methods were by no means as bad as the rumors in the capital, and it was not an exaggeration to describe them as being well hidden. Seeing that he was so confident, he nodded and agreed, promising to follow Yang Gongjing at all times. The two of them just finished talking. I saw Yang Gongjing and his party had already walked out of the front hall, greeting them and getting ready to set off. Su Tong walked to the crowd and took a look with the help of his life ikemen. Sure enough, he saw a little black person on top of everyone's head. The villain always kept his mouth open, chattering something above their heads. Yang Gongjing frowned when she saw the two people approaching. You don't want to escape, do you? If you want to escape before the battle, even Ma Chi will not be able to save your lives. Ah! Your Excellency has misunderstood, we never had this intention. Li 11 was startled by Yang Gongjing's words and wondered if this old guy had taken the wrong medicine. If I hadn't sacrificed my life to protect you that night, you would have been torn into pieces by those monsters. Su Tong also hurriedly said that he would protect you to the death, which made Yang Gongjing's expression improve a lot, and she waved her hand to hurry up and get ready to go on the road. Li 11 looked confused, but Su Tong narrowed his eyes. He knew that the effect of the villain pill had begun to take effect. Although Lianshan Temple has the word Lianshan in its name, it is still some distance away from Lianshan County. Moreover, it was an abandoned temple. The mountain road was rugged and difficult to navigate, and it was impossible for vehicles and horses to pass through it. It was not easy to get in. After passing through the dense bamboo forest at the foot of the mountain, everyone was finally able to vaguely see a corner of the temple in front of them from the forest. "Let's take a rest first, I can't walk anymore." Zhao Sisson, who was wearing glasses, sat on the ground, his face covered with sweat. He took out a sheepskin water bottle from his backpack, filled himself with a sip, and motioned for everyone to sit down and take a rest. Cut. Looking at Zhao Sisson's novice appearance, Gu Xinbei and others immediately showed contempt. No matter whether it was the Balian sect headed by Gu Xinbei or the strangers here at Yang Gongjing, they had no regard for this new student. People don't have any good feelings in their hearts. After all, this guy always treats them as charlatans, and no one will have a good temper towards him. If it were another time, anyone present could kill him with just a finger. But now the situation is special. This guy came here with an order, and the women behind him are protecting him, so no one can do anything to him. However, it is inevitable that there will be a burst of sarcasm on the lips. Su Mao took out a piece of paper, shook his hand, and saw a small house appear out of thin air. "Sir, I know that you are weak, the wind is strong in the mountains, and the ground is cold, why don't you go inside and rest first?" Su Mao's hand naturally attracted everyone's attention. Rumor has it that in the heyday of the Shadow Paper Man, it was a great skill of Cai men, but later it was lost for a time. At this time, when everyone saw Su Mao's shadow paper skill, he conjured a magic weapon out of thin air. When arriving at the suite, everyone was amazed. Of course, Su Mao was not so kind. Seeing that Zhao Sisson was really going to go into the house, Su Mao flicked his fingers and the house in front of him turned into a piece of tissue paper again. Suddenly Zhao Sisson was stunned. Seeing his stunned look, everyone burst into laughter. Obviously Su Mao deliberately used this to humiliate Zhao Sisson and told him that your so-called new learning is nothing more than this. However, after Zhao Sisson was stunned for a moment, he pushed up his glasses, squatted down and took a closer look at the painting on the ground, and then took out a notebook from his pocket. After he drew a lot in the notebook, he took out the scissors and carefully cut out some pieces of paper, and then unfolded the notebook for everyone to see. There was a small house drawn on the notebook, which looked ordinary, but with a slight twitch of Zhao Sisson's hand, he actually pulled out a note from the notebook. As Zhao Sisson pulled the note with his fingers, a magical picture appeared. The small house that was originally drawn on the paper actually stood up, creating a house out of thin air on the paper. "Is this your shadow paper?" I admit that it is an amazing craftsmanship to create such an effect on such a thin piece of paper, but there is actually nothing outstanding about this principle. Su Mao's expression was dull for a few seconds, as if he never expected that someone could discover the key secret of the Shadow Paper Man so easily. He was shocked and angry for a while, and the muscles on his entire face were trembling. But Zhao Sisson didn't seem to notice Su Mao's expression and continued, "Your magic is amazing, but I once heard a saying when I was studying in the West. Even the most powerful magic can only break through the window. There's nothing strange about paper." Zhao Sisson said it in an understatement, but it made Su Mao's eyes turn red. In front of so many people, he exposed his old background, and he was ready to kill this guy. However, the women behind him silently put their hands on the handles of their knives. The 5 Zhu family brothers looked at each other and stood silently behind Su Mao. As for Gu Zhenbei and others, they stood silently aside and sneered, wishing they could fight. "I don't know what's wrong, but I've been feeling very uncomfortable since I had breakfast. At this moment, seeing these two groups trying to fight, I didn't think about the so-called Big Orange. Instead, I thought about the two groups yesterday. How to insult yourself and greet your ancestors. If Su Tong looked above Gu Zinbei's head at this moment, he would definitely see the little man crawling next to Gu Zinbei's ear, constantly whispering. Not only Gu Zhenbei, except Su Tong and Li 11, everyone had a little person crawling next to their ears. Even the monk Hui Yuan had a little man crawling beside his ears, chattering endlessly. Everyone looked at each other with unkind eyes. Even Yang Gongjing's eyes were uncertain at the moment. She hated this kind of new student who admired foreign things and loved them to the core. She couldn't help thinking in her mind, should she do something now? Kill them. When the time comes, he will push the matter onto Holy Sun White Lotus and say that he himself does not know how high the sky is and how high he is. What does being killed by Yin soldiers have to do with him? He can also take the opportunity to attack Xi and Shui. Once this idea came into my mind, it was like a flood, out of control. Su Tong put the villain pill into the stove, wanting to give it a try to see the effect. Unexpectedly, the effect was surprisingly good. Now there was no need for his original plan of instigating them secretly. He could just wait for them to fight, then carry Yang Gongjing and leave. Yes, this is his plan. What about Lianshan Temple? One look at it and you can tell that that place is not a good place. If an old guy like Yang Gongjing, who has perfect scores in theory but zero scores in actual combat, goes in, even if I risk my life, I may not dare to protect him. Since the task is only to protect Yang Gongjing, why should I go into Lianshan Temple and knock him unconscious? Wouldn't it be more delicious to take away? Thinking of Su Tong staring at Yang Gongjing's neck, he almost couldn't help but take action. Boom! Suddenly, a bell rang from the distant direction of Lianshan Temple. The sound of the bell hit everyone's ears and knocked the little devil out of everyone's ears. Su Tong was shocked. He didn't expect that the sound of the bell would break his villain's elixir. With no villain in their ears, and the sudden ringing of the bell, everyone calmed down and suddenly felt that they had been too impulsive just now. Especially Yang Gongjing, when she remembered the idea she had just now, she was so close to giving the order to fight with the opponent with red eyes, and she felt a wave of fear in her heart. Just when everyone was secretly regretting their impulsiveness, a song was heard in the distance. A gust of yellow wind and a gust of sand leaves no one home for thousands of miles. Looking back, the snow has disappeared. The three-eyed monk blinded the horse, and the stone man with one eye stirred up rebellion in the Yellow River. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 361. This is an anti-song from Yuanqi 5 Elements Chronicles. Yang Gongjing, as the deputy supervisor of Qintian prison, naturally recognized this ballad. Gu Zinbei and others couldn't help but feel shocked. This song had a great relationship with their White Lotus sect. It is said that during the Yuan dynasty forced 150,000 migrant workers to build dams on the Yellow River. White Lotus followers Han Shantong, Lu Futong, and others buried a stone man in the river and engraved on the back one eye of the stone man stirs up rebellion in the Yellow River. When the stone man was dug out, people's hearts really changed. Han Shantong claimed to be a descendant of Zhao Song and the eighth grandson of Song Huitsong, and took the opportunity to organize an uprising. This is the famous Red Turban Uprising. He was quickly captured and immediately killed. After his death, his son Han Liner was established as the leader and continued to rebel against the Yuan dynasty and promote the Song dynasty for more than 10 years. Until a beggar holding a bowl appeared in the world, ending that era of chaos and opening a new era in which the emperor guarded the country and the king died for the country. Now that this ballad is reappearing in the world, could it be that it is really the Holy Son of White Lotus? Along with the singing, two barefoot children walked out from under the woods in the distance. These two children, a boy and a girl, looked delicate and childish, just like two ceramic dolls. Barefoot, stepping on the ground, born from the world, simple and flawless, it is difficult for people to associate the Yin soldiers clearing the way with them. 2. Standing behind Zhao Sisson, the leader of the Red Lotus Church, Meng Yao, held down the handle of the knife in his hand, ready to rob someone at any time. Wait, don't make a move, those are just two children. Zhao Sisson stood up and stopped Meng Yao, walked to the two children, took out two candies from his bag and gave them to them. The boy glanced at it and didn't pick it up, but the girl took the candy in her hand out of curiosity. Meng Yao didn't like the nerd Zhao Sisson at all, and even felt very disgusted with this new student. But this time they came in the name of Xingxiu, so naturally they had to be represented by a Xingxiu figure. Zhao Sisson was recommended by the palace steward, so it was natural for them to refuse. But in his heart, he already regarded Zhao Sisson as an abandoned son. On the side, Su Tong looked at the two children with the help of his life ikumen. At first glance, the two dolls looked like normal people, but the strange thing was that there was no luck on their heads, and their bodies did not appear to be the same as those around them. Resonance, the last time I saw such a situation, I saw it with Mr. Wen Yuan. Ya, do you think they are Yinshan? Su Tong shouted to Dia at the entrance of the hall. Dia shook her head, no, they don't have the unique aura of gods, and they are not living people. Daya's eyes were filled with green light, and the more she looked at them, the more confused she became. For a moment, she couldn't even tell what the origins of these two dolls were. It seems that the Holy Son of White Lotus does have some tricks up his sleeve. Su Tong glanced at the shattered villains on the ground and suddenly became wary. I saw two children standing in front of everyone, looking very much like the wealthy boys beside Guanyin Bodhisattva. The Holy Sun came to the world to overthrow the tyranny of the Great Rule and rebuild the splendor of the Ming dynasty. I specially invite all knowledgeable people to come to the temple to meet you. The two boys said in unison, and after speaking, they turned and walked towards the temple. Yang Gongjing straightened her sleeves and strode in front. Su Tong's lips twitched and he could only follow helplessly. Naturally, they were followed by Gu Zhenbei and others, and they walked even more hurriedly. If the Holy Son of White Lotus really came to the world, then the revival of their White Lotus sect would be just around the corner. Zhao Sisson and others followed behind. Everyone followed the two boys, turning left and right, and came to the gate of the temple. I saw two white lanterns hanging on the door. The door opened, and the boy stepped in and made an invitation gesture to everyone. The temple is very big, and I don't know when it was built. Judging from the style, it looks a bit like the Ming dynasty. As soon as they walked through the front yard, the two boys in front of them suddenly stopped and stood on the same spot, one on the left and the other on the right. The Holy Sun is in front, and those who are destined can meet each other. Everyone looked up and saw a palace in front of them, but it looked a little dilapidated. Just when everyone wanted to ask more clearly where the Holy Sun White Lotus was, when they turned around, everyone's expression suddenly changed, and they saw that the pair of boys had turned into two stone sculptures. Seeing this, Zhao Sisson walked to the stone sculpture and took a look. He found that the stone sculpture of the female doll was still holding the candy he had just given to the doll, and even the candy had turned into a stone sculpture. Now everyone was dumbfounded. If it was a cover-up prepared in advance, how could even this candy turn into stone? No. There is a scam in this place, it's better to leave first. When Su Mao saw this, he felt a chill in his heart for no reason, and turned around to leave. Stop. Upon seeing this, Yang Gongjing hurriedly called him, but Su Mao couldn't care so much. This place gave him a very ominous feeling. He took out a piece of paper from his backpack, shook his fingers, and pulled out a fierce horse out of thin air. He turned over and sat on the fiery horse. I'm sorry. Su, will admit how the Kintian prison will punish you in the future. forgive me for my lack of academic skills and my unfitness for such a great use. After saying that, Su Mao clamped the horse's legs, and the horse neighed and rushed behind him quickly. Broken. Yang Gongjing shook his head. He didn't mean to blame Su Mao, but they were already in the game now. So what if the other party could easily let them leave? If Su Mao wanted to escape now, he might be seeking his own death. Sir, what should we do? Li 11 was also a little flustered at this moment. Although the mission sect was good at magic, it had no way of transforming living people. With such a strange scene in front of him, Li 11 inevitably started to retreat in his heart. As soon as Li 11 opened his mouth, everyone focused their attention on Yang Gongjing. Although Yang Gongjing is just an ordinary person, being able to become the supervisor of Qintian prison, even if he is a deputy, is enough to show that Yang Gongjing has some real talents and learning. In the final analysis, the reason why everyone can get together is because they know that the Holy Sun is not easy to welcome, and they still need to rely on the ability of Qin Tianjian. Yang Gongjing said nothing, looked around, and took out a compass from her pocket. He was seen dragging the compass in his hand, constantly comparing the directions, and then silently reciting a formula. Li 11 listened carefully and found out that it was the 24 Mountains formula, which was specially used for compass positioning. It's a pity that although he knew it, he really had only a partial understanding of it. He only learned part of it in mission and didn't learn the other part. Now that the book is in use, he regrets it. He secretly vowed in his heart that if he returns alive this time, he must study Feng Shui theory assiduously. Go left. After the compass was positioned for a long time, Yang Gongjing pointed with her hand and led everyone to the path on the left. At the end of the path is a Buddhist temple. The Maitreya Buddha in the temple has been broken into a pile of rubble. Seeing this, Monk Huiwen put his hands together and recited Amitabha silently. When everyone walked around the Buddha statue, they found that there were coffins neatly placed in front of them. A member of the White Lotus sect wearing a government official's uniform walked over to the coffin and took a look, only to find that the coffin was actually new. Why are there so many coffins here? Gu Xinbei was also confused, wondering whether the Holy Sun was hiding himself in a certain coffin. Just when he was doubting, Gu Xinbei's ears suddenly twitched, and he vaguely heard something coming from the coffin in his hand. The voice sounded familiar, but for a while he couldn't remember where he had heard it. But when he listened carefully, the voice disappeared. Seeing this, Gu Xinbei couldn't help but clench the blade in his hand and walk towards the coffin with squinted eyes. He was hesitating in his heart whether to split the coffin open with a knife and take a look. Come quickly. The Holy Sun is here. Suddenly someone in the distance shouted, and everyone quickly walked over to take a look. I saw a lotus pond behind the Buddhist hall, and in the middle of the pond, there was a girl sitting. Su Tong followed Yang Gongjing closely, fearing that something might happen to the old guy, so he walked a few steps slower. When he tilted his head and looked into the lotus pond, his eyes suddenly widened. Hey, it's like hell. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 363. This is the season of winter that is about to begin. People are shivering with cold in the morning, and the cold wind blows on their faces like knives. In this season of depression, the lotus pond in front of us shows vitality that goes against the laws of the season. Bright lotuses bloom in the lotus pond. You can even see butterflies flying among them, and the girl is sitting on a huge black lotus, with her legs crossed, as if she is in meditation. The girl's body was naked, but her body was covered with dense scales, which glowed with a dazzling cyan halo under the sunlight. Such a mysterious scene shocked everyone. Su Tong's eyes widened, and a wave of turmoil arose in his heart. Why is Liro here? No matter her appearance, figure, or even the scales on her body, they told Su Tong how similar this girl was to the Liro he picked up. But his intuition told him that this could never be Liro. The real Liro is in the capital at this time, so how could she appear in this place? Thinking of this, Su Tong used his life icon to look over, but he saw nothing. Empty, nothing. There was nothingness in the lotus pond. Phantom. He thought of this possibility for the first time, but soon realized that this was not an illusion, but something between reality and fiction. Grandmaster. This thought popped into his mind, and Su Tong's heart trembled. A very bad premonition came over him. In an instant, his mind changed rapidly, and he understood something in an instant. It's fake. The Holy Sun is fake, and the way the Yin soldiers opened the way is also fake. This is a trap. Just when Su Tong's face was extremely ugly, a cool breeze blew. Wherever the cool breeze blew, a bleak and strange sound came into everyone's ears. It was impossible to tell what kind of musical instrument the sound was, like xiao xiao. And like a flute. Look. The Zhu brothers pointed at the lotus pond in front and screamed, only to see that the lotus in front of them withered quickly in the sneaky wind. Son. Gu Xinbei looked at the fallen lotus, and he didn't care about the lotus. He jumped up and wanted to rush forward to save the Holy Sun. But when the lotus fell in the air, Gu Xinbei saw clearly that there was some Holy Sun there, but it was just a rotting corpse of an official. Obviously this corpse is the official officer who came to investigate the problem of Lianshan Temple not long ago. The moment he saw the body clearly, Gu Xinbei's expression suddenly changed. He kicked his feet violently and used a move to turn the carp over. His body actually jumped back out of thin air. With this light skill alone, Gu Xinbei is enough to be proud of the world. However, there was no sound of praise behind him. Instead, as soon as his feet landed on the ground, he suddenly heard a burst of wind coming from behind his head. Gu Zhenbei was so frightened that he bent his legs and jumped up. Not only dodging the sneak attack from behind, he did a somersault in the air. His legs were as strong as tree roots and his body was hanging upside down above his head. On the tree trunk. Turning around, his eyes stared behind him. He saw that his brothers had fallen to the ground, and at some point a large number of officers and soldiers were rushing towards him with knives. The people who attacked him were none other than the Zhu brothers. At this moment, the pig boss grinned and raised 2 sledgehammers to kill him. The hammerheads made a fierce whistling sound, and the pig boss threw them directly at Gu Xinbei. The imperial eagle dog is seeking death. Gu Zhenbei's eyes turned red, and the bright light flickered in his hand. A soft sword kept ringing, and the tip of the sword stabbed diagonally from up to down. A soft force was generated, and when he shook it around the sledgehammer unexpectedly was bounced back. The situation reversed in an instant, and Boss Zhu let out a scream. It seemed that he did not expect that Gu Xinbei had such means, and he quickly raised the sledgehammer in his other hand to meet him. Boom! A huge buzzing sound erupted between the 2 hammers, and Boss Pig's arm went numb. It felt as if the entire arm was not his own, and he suddenly lost strength. In the midst of the lightning and flint, with a roar, the white man Gu Xin was already in front of him. The pig boss who had lost his weapon suddenly raised his head, and saw a cold sword shadow in front of his eyes. He shouted a scream in his mouth, and his head was already covered by Gu's head. Zinc white sword light enveloped him. I saw the software spinning upward around Boss Pig's neck, and Boss Pig's huge head rolled down from the top of his head. After killing the pig boss, the evil fire in Gu Zhenbei's heart rose instead of falling, because he saw Yang Gongjing and the man named Zhao Sisin not far away looking at him with smiling faces. The 2 of them stood behind a group of officials, talking and laughing, and had already fully divided the credit for wiping out the remnants of the White Lotus sect. Kill. With old and new grudges, Gu Xinbei's eyes were red at this moment, and he raised the soft sword in his hand to kill. Kill. Kill! Kill! Gu Zhenbei killed with great speed, the soft sword in his hand was as fast as the wind. Little did he know that the people he killed at this moment were his good brothers. In Su Tong's eyes, Gu Zhenbei was stunned for a short time, then suddenly pulled out the soft sword from his waist and chopped off the head of the brother behind him. Then he started fighting like a man possessed and crazy. Why do you say it's a fight? Because he's not the only one who's crazy. I kill you. Yang Gongjing turned around, her face was twisted into a ball, and she grabbed Su Tong. Su Tong looked at the wrinkled old hands, turned away with disgust on his face, and then saw Yang Gongjing grabbing the wood behind her with both hands, pinching hard with red eyes, and scolding while pinching, "You idiot, you bitch, you dare to commit adultery, I will strangle you to death. I will strangle you to death." Regardless of what Yang Gongjing saw, Su Tong looked at the chaos in front of him and locked his eyes for a moment. They must have been under some kind of illusion. But now he is very clear-headed, not because of his superior concentration, but because after reaching the full level of dark physique, he happens to have the ability to be immune to mental control. Although I don't know what level 4 mind control is, it is obvious that I am not affected at this moment. With the help of the ability of the life Ikemen, he looked around and found black ripples flashing around him, and the source of the ripples was the inconspicuous rubble of the Buddha statues around him. Although he found the reason, he did not take action immediately. Instead, his eyes gradually became absent-minded and he waved his hands casually, as if he had fallen into madness like these people. He wanted to see what the person who laid it out actually wanted to do. Ding bell, jingle bell. Suddenly, a series of bells rang, and everyone stopped when they heard the bells. Following the ringing of the bell, everyone slowly stepped forward, as if they had heard some call, and walked towards each other in the distance. When everyone passes through the Buddhist hall path, it is the so-called Mahavira Hall. A huge Buddha statue stands in the treasure hall, but the Buddha statue has long lost its former glory, and is instead covered with a thick layer of dust and cobwebs. Everyone walked into the hall with a dull expression, only to hear the sound of bells getting closer and closer. After a while, Su Tong suddenly saw a black shadow passing through the hall. The black shadow jumped up to the hall. Su Tong took a closer look and was surprised to find that it was actually a monkey. The monkey is small, like an ordinary macaque, and the sound of the bell comes from the monkey's ankle. The golden bells accompanied the monkeys as they walked back and forth, making bursts of sound. The monkey lay on the Buddha statue and looked around. Suddenly he seemed to see something interesting. He quickly jumped down and landed in front of Su Tong. His eyes looked at Su Tong. Then he walked to Li 11 and said casually. After rummaging for a while, he walked boringly to the other side, Zhao Sisen's body. Maybe it was because Zhao Sisen had a lot of things on him. After rummaging for a while, the monkey actually pulled out an apricot yellow paper charm from Zhao Sisen's arms. After playing with the paper talisman for a few times, the monkey tore it into pieces. At this time, it seemed to have suddenly seen something good. It turned around, jumped down, and came to Monk Weewen. It saw Monk Weewen's hand. As soon as the monkey's eyes lit up on that string of rosary beads, he reached out and wanted to take off the rosary beads. But just as he stretched out his hand, the motionless Monk Weewen in front of him suddenly reached out and grabbed the monkey's head. At the same time, a long sword in his sleeve was like a swift and poisonous snake, and it quickly pierced the monkey's chest. Accompanied by the monkey's screams, the long sword penetrated the monkey's shoulder and directly nailed the monkey to the pillar behind. The sudden change surprised Su Tong, but he still did not dare to move, because he knew that the monkey was not the key. At this moment, there was a great master hiding somewhere who had not yet appeared. Looking sideways, I saw Monk Weewen slowly clasping his hands together and walking up to the monkey. Amitabha, I didn't expect that there is no holy sun at all, but a monkey is causing trouble. The method of practice practiced by Monk Weewen is special. Even if he was hit by the strange illusion just now, he only recovered after being hit for a moment. But he didn't expect that the so-called Holy Sun turned out to be just a joke, and the instigator behind it turned out to be just a person. A monkey. Just a monkey? Monk Wewen didn't know, but he was certain that there was no other living person within 100 meters around this Buddhist temple except for their group. Thinking of this, Monk Wewen reached out to pull out the sword, but just when his hand was about to touch the hilt, a long sigh came to his ears. Why? Hearing this sigh, Hui Yuan's body froze, and cold sweat broke out on her forehead. Slowly turning around, he realized that someone was standing behind him. What was even more unexpected was that the guy standing behind him was actually Zhao Sisson. How could it be you? Seeing Zhao Sisson, Monk Wewen's eyes widened with disbelief on his face. He was a half-step master, who could appear behind him silently. What was even more shocking was that the person who appeared behind him was actually Zhao Sisson, who was full of new knowledge. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 364. In horror, Monk Wewen suddenly raised his hand, and 9 pagodas appeared behind him. These pagodas were not what people often see, but were blood pagodas stacked with human heads. As Monk Wewen waved his hands and pushed forward, 9 blood towers slammed into Zhao Sisson in front of him. Hey! However, facing the 9 blood towers falling head-on, Zhao Sisson sighed again and just took a step back, causing the surrounding space to become distorted. The 9 blood towers were smashed down. They were only an inch away from Zhao Sisson, but they couldn't be smashed down no matter what, as if they were frozen there. What's even weirder is that when Zhao Sisson retreats, even the surrounding environment seems to be distorted and elongated. Grand Master. Seeing this scene, Monk Wewen exclaimed with disbelief on his face. Grand Masters are so rare. Looking at the current system, there are only a few truly recognized Grand Masters. He has already reached the level of half-step master, but after so many years, he has not even touched the threshold of a Grand Master. And the new student in front of him turned out to be a great master. How could Wewen accept this? Could it be that after so many years of hard training, all of it was on the dog? Zhao Sisson ignored Monk Wewen's indifference and just said calmly. When Emperor Kong was in power, there was a method in the western region called Fudo Mingguang's compassion technique. Because the practice method was too cruel, it was not tolerated by the Central Plains. In the 13th year of Emperor Kang's reign, Shaolin led the sect to be wiped out. But that year someone escaped and later disappeared without a trace. You should be the remaining disciple of this section. Zhao Sisson told the origin of Monk Wewen in an understatement, which made Monk Wewen turn blue. These are all secrets that are not open to the public. After so many years, no one remembers the truth anymore. Who are you? Who are you? How do you even know this? Monk Wewen asked. However, Zhao Sisson shook his head. You can't say it. After the words fell, Zhao Sisson took action. It was not clear what method he used. He just flicked his fingers lightly. Monk Wewen's pupils tightened, and a silver needle passed through his eyes. He suddenly froze there. He couldn't move at all. For a moment, bright red blood dripped from his mouth and nose, and he was already dead. The gap between a half-step master and a grand master is so huge that it cannot be calculated using logic. Bang! The body of Monk Wewen fell heavily to the ground, raising a thick layer of dust on the ground. After Zhao Sisson killed Monk Wewen, he walked to the monkey, pulled out the long sword stuck in the monkey's body, and touched the monkey's shoulder with his palm. The wound originally punctured by the sword healed quickly. The unbelievable method was impressive, but Su Tong felt extremely strong pressure at this time. Zhao Sisson picked up the Buddhist beads from Monk Wewen, handed them to the monkey to play with, and immediately put the monkey on his shoulders. I'm also very curious. This monk learned the Fudo Myoyo Sad Karma technique. It can offset the illusion I arranged. You what? Why wasn't it affected at all? As he spoke, Zhao Sisin looked at Su Tong, who was standing aside. Call. Hearing Zhao Sisin's words, Su Tong relaxed, stretched his stiff muscles, walked out, closed his hands slightly, and raised his hands towards Zhao Sisin. Junior, Ma Hongwen pays homage to Senior. As he spoke, he raised his hands high and bowed naturally to Zhao Sisin in front of him. When Zhao Sisin saw this and was about to speak, his expression suddenly changed. The world in front of him suddenly turned dark, a crack was torn open, and there was a sound of horse hooves galloping behind him. When he turned around, he saw a cavalry rushing towards him. Huh! For a brief moment, Zhao Sisin was not surprised but overjoyed, because this was the first time he saw such a wonderful technique. Facing the cavalry that rushed up, Zhao Sisin did not resist and allowed the cavalry to rush through his body. He even closed his eyes and tilted his head, with an expression on his face as if he was carefully tasting a delicious dish. His brows were knitted together, his expression became more and more distressed, and he said to himself, "It's strange, it's a Taoist method, why does it feel like a curse?" In just a short moment, Zhao Sisin actually had a deeper understanding of Beishenko, but it was this understanding that gave him an unprecedented curiosity. This magical spell, which looks like a sneak attack, actually coincides with the Taoist Qi sect technique. This is not something that ordinary people can create. Even if he is a great master and has read countless Qi sect classics, he would not dare to say he had such ability. Just when Zhao Sisin wanted to take a closer look, the crack in front of him disappeared. Huh! When Zhao Sisin saw this, he immediately became very unhappy. When he looked back, he found that Su Tongren had disappeared. Not only was he missing, but Li 11 and Yang Gongjing had also disappeared. Oh, slick! Zhao Sisin laughed, but his face became colder as he smiled. If this kid ran away alone, he might let him live out of love for talents. But it won't work if he takes Yang Gongjing away. Zhao Sisin slowly walked out of the hall, turned around and gently closed the door. Soon he heard a loud bang and the Buddhist hall collapsed. Go ahead. As agreed, I will give you your freedom. Zhao Sisin took off the bell from the monkey's feet, put the monkey on the ground, and waved his hand to signal the monkey to leave. The monkey took a few steps forward, scratched his head, and looked back at his old master, but when the monkey turned back, Zhao Sisin's figure had disappeared. Shua shwa shwa. In the woods, a fat figure was seen moving quickly. Su Tong sat on the fat shoulder, looking around from time to time. Headmaster, what's going on? Da Ya at the entrance asked, as if it was difficult to understand why a great master suddenly appeared. I don't know, but I'm sure this is a game. Su Tong's face was unusually heavy. Not everyone could detect the changes on the entire chessboard when they understood that they were a chess piece. As a player in the game, it is difficult to figure out the other party's purpose, but one thing is certain, since the main task requires you to protect Yang Gongjing, it must be inevitably connected with Yang Gongjing. But at this moment, Su Tong felt uncertain. After all, the person he was facing was a Grand Master, a master of the same level as his master. It would be a shame to say there was no pressure. Even at this moment, he could already feel the invisible pressure behind him slowly approaching him. Looking back, even though there is nothing there, it still feels like it is everywhere. However, it was this strong sense of oppression that made Su Tong's eyes shine with an indescribable light. It was a very complex emotion. If it had to be described, it could only be described as excitement. Being able to fight against a great master not only brings the excitement and tension of facing danger and the unknown, but also brings another level of excitement to challenge oneself. But to achieve this step, he must be fully prepared. At least at this moment, it will definitely not be a good choice. Moreover, it was still daytime, and the advantage of his dark physique could not be used. The best thing to do in this kind of adversity was naturally to run. As for Li 11 and Yang Gongjing, he threw them into Big Fat's belly, and Big Fat's ghost form was most suitable for walking in this dense jungle. Just when Su Tong was thinking about how to get away for the moment, his mind moved and he suddenly seemed to feel something. Looking back, the dense forest behind him was empty, but at this moment, the surrounding mountains and vegetation were emitting strong fluctuations, and a suffocating sense of oppression was getting closer and closer. Headmaster. With such a strong sense of oppression, even the three Daya who were hiding at the entrance of the hall couldn't help but tremble, especially Daya. Ever since she entered the script world, her original host overestimated her capabilities and tried to compete with Xu Mingqing, but was killed by Xu Mingqing with a sword. Daya has had a psychological shadow on the Grand Master. Being chased by a great master at this moment undoubtedly made the shadow in her heart even stronger. Little brother, walk slowly. The road ahead is difficult. Don't accidentally slip and fall. Zhao Sisen's voice came from an unknown direction. The hoarse voice did not sound like a young man at all, but more like an old man who was shouting to his grandson not to run around and to be careful about falling. Su Tong twitched the corner of his mouth and silently raised a middle finger behind him. However, at this moment, the big fat man suddenly stopped. Su Tong was startled and looked back, only to see a river appearing in the white mist. Su Tong was dumbfounded now. The river was so huge that he couldn't see the edge at a glance. It's over. Daya plopped down and knelt down on the ground. Wasn't she at a dead end? Su Tong didn't expect that there could be such a big river in this damn place. But looking at the river in front of him, he suddenly remembered the 16 words of Taoist Sun Long: if the road ahead is difficult, stop when you encounter water, and you won't light a lamp or knock on the door, nor will you listen. Thinking of these 16 words, the following paragraph has come true. Thinking of what Zhao Sisen said just now, Su Tong suddenly felt a different kind of feeling in his heart. Divination is sometimes very spiritual, it is just a feeling. Even ordinary people in reality often inadvertently have a premonition of the next moment, or even a few seconds later. When such a premonition comes, it will give people an extremely strong premonition. If you suddenly have such a feeling about a set of numbers when you are buying lottery tickets, don't hesitate to buy it. You will definitely not go wrong. However, most people rarely have such a premonition. Even if it occurs, it will be because of too much. Short-lived and ungraspable. But Su Tong was different. When this strange feeling hit him, he instinctively used his life I Chi Men to look towards the water. In the dark waves, a different light appeared in his sight.